Can you hear me?
Hi. Can you see me? I can't see you yet.
Oh,
Wait.
I can see you actually and hear you as
Uh,
well.
okay.
Can't
I
see me how? As in, is it like blurry?
on my side it is still lagging on one page. So
Ah,
give me a moment.
mm, mm. Okay. Um, so far, is my voice clear? Could appreciate if you guys could let me know in the comments. If from my side it's clear, I think our other practitioner, our other speaker, Yong Sin, is facing a bit of a technical issue.
Hi. Yes.
Hi, can you see me now?
Yes.
Okay, great.
All right. Thank you for waiting. Welcome everyone. Let's while we are waiting for everyone to join in, I will do an introduction with everyone. So today we have Naomi here, our registered counselor, and me, Yong-Sing, as a clinical psychologist. Today we will dive into this topic about grief. I believe that a lot of people experience grief at some age. We will have this feeling of loss and a lot of emotion reaction that comes after experiencing loss as well. So we will go into this topic in deep. So if any one of you don't have time to go through the whole life, feel free to review this at a later time whenever you are convenient. All right. Okay. So what do you know about grief? Maybe Naomi, you can share about your own experience or before we go into the formal definition of grief.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's a heavy topic, isn't it? When we talk about grief, it comes with a lot of painful emotions and it's associated with loss. So, yeah, any loss at all. And I believe it doesn't have to be just to losing someone to death, right? So
Yeah.
on that front, I believe, yes, I have a fair share of losses. And
Mm,
a lot of ups and downs in trying to process coming to terms with those losses.
yeah.
Yeah,
It takes
yeah, and
time to
yes,
really process the losses, like you said. I'll
indeed.
just give an example, right? So recently, COVID has just passed, right? A few years already,
Hmm.
but the grief that comes with the pandemic actually was quite pronounced. Quite a lot of people experiencing grief from the pandemic because a lot of loved ones are passed away due to the illness, and they don't get to really mourn for the loss,
Mm,
and because there's
mm,
no ceremony allowed, nothing that they can do after the person passed away because you cannot do gatherings, right? Yes.
indeed.
So
Yeah.
so that's like one of the examples where you say like sometimes you really have something that you want to mourn for, but you don't get the opportunity or acknowledgement for this grief.
Mm,
Mm.
yeah, yeah, definitely. That opportunity to mourn itself is key in the process of like, going through our emotions and understanding our grief process, right?
Yeah.
It's such a complicated it's not just an emotion, it's more of like, an experience that comes
Mm.
with losing could be people. Yeah, when we talk about loss, that could be a lot associated to it, and I believe you'll be touching in detail on that. But yeah, that opportunity to mourn the loss is definitely something that is key. And being deprived of that opportunity is definitely, it does take a toll. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's a matter of like whether or not we have that opportunity to do it, and sometimes we actively avoid it as well because the process itself is just so painful. So
Mm.
naturally, there are instances where people choose to push it aside or avoid mourning because it's all too painful. That takes a
Yeah.
toll. That comes with a price. Yeah.
Yeah, so we have gone through some of the experiences where we describe how it's painful, it's difficult to face grief feeling.
Mm.
So basically, the meaning of grief is the emotion reaction after a loss. It doesn't
Mm.
matter if it's a death or something, other things like job loss, breaking up, you have missed your opportunity to go to your ceremony or your graduation, your pet passed away, or some major life transition. It could be marriage, something positive as well. It can also involve grief because when you gain something, you also lost something. So marriage, parenthood, moving into a new place, new country, new state, retirement as well. So all these different changes in life can also be part under grief lah. It's just a different levels or different intensity as well. Okay. All right.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah.
I like how you pointed out about the complexities in grief, right? It isn't just about losing someone to death. It isn't about losing entirely. It can involve gaining something and losing something at the same time. So it can puzzle us sometimes, thinking about the kind of emotions that we are going through in situations even that feels like it's a good news. For example, a few things that you pointed out about, like, moving into marriage, getting into parenthood. It's like a transition, right? So this
Yeah.
kind of transitions are often seen as, something that is pleasant, right? Why should you feel anything otherwise? So this is how we would feel. But to know that grief can happen even in these kind of transitions is key for us to actually know this, so that we won't dismiss our feelings, dismiss others as well when they are having their feelings, emotional reactions about these kind of situations. So which is why we are holding this space today to talk about this, so that more of us are aware the complexities involved in grief, and yeah, what kind of stages are involved as well. It happens in stages, and I will go in detail about that as well. But yeah, I like how that, you pointed out how it doesn't only limit to one particular situation, because our traditional understanding of grief is about losing people to death.
Yes. Yes. Maybe our audience can also comment what are the times where you experience some sort of grief. It doesn't have to be losing someone to death, but it can be transitions in life. You were single last time and then you got married. So the changes are quite big. Becoming a parent as well, going back to single from being a couple. So all these changes, feel free to note it down in the comments as well, so we can understand lah, what you're going through, and we can probably discuss more into it as well.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, and since we're also inviting people to reflect a bit on like their life instances where they have felt grief, and we're also talking about the complexities in it, right? And I would like to also take this opportunity for and invite you as well to do the same. Maybe if you don't mind sharing instances where you felt grief. The most recent one I can recall is like, and it's very hard to understand in that moment, but it was more of like some after having like a such a pleasant time. I was out of the country, so I had such a pleasant time, and returning and feeling that loss of that pleasant experiences felt so heavy. Actually, it felt like grief. Yeah. So
Mm.
to me, that was the most recent experience, I would say. So
Mm.
yeah, of course, on the surface you feel like, what, you had a pleasant time. Why are you grieving over that? But
The
we, as
post,
complex
yeah,
beings, yeah,
they
yeah,
call this, right, the post travel kind of grief, right?
blues, depression,
Blues,
whatever
yeah.
it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Mm.
What about
So,
you?
yeah, for me, I recall my graduation from my master study. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people experience this after the 3 years of degree or 2 years master. They've been into this study mode all this time, very structured. Everything is like planned out, and suddenly, pop, it's graduation. Like you're done, you're over. Like it's a major transition from studying to
Yeah,
working life. Yeah, so and during that transition, I felt a lot of this like empty feeling or like a bit of loss as well. Like, oh, where do I land? What do I look for? What do I want in life? Like these existential questions will come in as well. And also like the loss of like, oh, I used to have this comfort when I study. I have the study break and all those things that they're no
True.
longer there. Yeah, it's a lot of changes, and your friends also will be going different ways, different paths as well, right? So a lot of this loss of friendship as
Indeed.
well, like they just like no longer there. Yeah. No,
Mm-hmm.
if our audience feel the same way, graduation or after traveling, you feel this going back to the day-to-day life, you feel a bit um sad, low, grief, that
Mm-hmm.
kind of feeling, like heavy kind of feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's not so intense that we can just forget about it.
Yeah,
But
we
actually,
can just
it's
get on with our day.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So, but actually, it's there that we just sometimes not really noticing. So, some of the examples I will just share lah, that some physical reactions or behavioral symptoms or emotional feelings
Mm-hmm.
that you can look out for if you're experiencing grief. Some of the physical ones will be like tightness in your chest, no energy, feeling like very tired, very weak, heart palpitation if you're feeling anxious or you're reflecting back on the past, then you might have more intense kind of physical reaction. Sometimes it's restlessness. Sometimes you cry a lot because you keep on thinking about more the loss that you had, right? I have read one person sharing like on the newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
She during the COVID, she didn't get to celebrate her to have her marriage, like the ceremony. Like, so it
Mm-hmm.
was like her dream wedding, and she didn't get to do that, and she cried over it because it was like really something lost. So to some people, marriage is like a
Indeed.
big thing. It's a ceremony, right? And then just didn't get to celebrate that. Also, is a loss for some people. So it doesn't have to be about losing someone as well. That you
Yeah.
will cry and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Missed opportunities. And
Mm,
yeah, definitely a lot of those things can make us experience grief as well. Yep.
yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. So for the behavioral reactions or behavioral symptoms, you can be more forgetful because your mind is somewhere else. You might feel like daydreaming, or looking back at your past memories a lot, that you have a lot of flashbacks, or you feel like just like very absent-minded, things like that lah. Like you're not in the present.
Mm.
Right? This is more, so if it's more obvious, then it means like maybe this loss is incurring big a huge pain to you. That's why you keep on being pulled back to that feeling of
Indeed.
loss. Yeah. And the last part is emotion reaction. That is how you might feel if you're
Mm.
experiencing grief. It can be anger. You're angry about why this person have to leave me, or why do I not get the job that I'm supposed to, or why am I fired from my job, or why do I have to go to this stage of life.
Feeling of
The last one,
injustice,
yeah,
unfairness. Mm.
injustice and stuff.
Yeah.
Denial as well. Yeah, so the next one will be denial, where you deny what's happening in the present. Like you still think that no, this is not true. This doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so in denial. Or you can feel numbness that is coming with denial, so you just don't feel anything. You just deny what's going on and you just go through with your life, not feeling the grief, right? And some people, they really experience it, then they feel loneliness, they feel like a lot of irritability, sadness, right? And that's about it lah. So you feel like a lot of anger, sadness, and some people will go to the numbness, apathy, where they don't want to feel anything. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, definitely. And this overlaps with the stages I was talking about earlier as well, because there's stages in grief that we would experience, and keeping in mind that these overlap with one another, these stages. There are 5 stages.
Mm.
A renowned researcher known as Kubler-Ross So according to him, there are these 5 stages, but these don't happen in particular order, in the sense that we always think like, I was in denial first, and then I moved on to anger, and then I moved on to depression, and blah blah blah. So it doesn't have to happen in stages, like distinct stages. It can slowly transition into it. You can still feeling a bit of denial and anger at the same time. These can easily overlap, and it also doesn't have to be in that particular sequence. So let me just name the 5 stages. So the 5 stages are basically denial, anger, depression, bargaining is one of it as well, and acceptance. And just because I named acceptance as last, it doesn't mean that it ends there, or that's the last thing you would experience. This happens in cycles. You can find yourself in acceptance one day and sometimes denial all over again. So, it's very complicated and complex in that sense. So yeah, definitely overlaps with the emotions that you mentioned earlier, right? So, which is why it makes perfect sense when we experience these emotions, when we are losing something, when we are going through some of the examples of life transitions and losses that we've been talking about. Here's where we're trying to make it a point to help everyone present here today to understand that um, how normal it is. We're trying to normalize this experience so that we offer ourselves and also the people around us the understanding when they are experiencing these emotions in what seemingly on the surface, feels like a pleasant experience. By right, you should be happy about moving into parenthood. By right, you should be happy about graduating. But there are certain heaviness that comes with it as well that we don't talk about enough. And when people open up about their experiences, we tend to dismiss. If we don't understand it, that's what's going to happen. We are going to dismiss them. We're going to make them feel silly for feeling that way, let alone they themselves and we ourselves can feel really confused about our emotions. Like, why are we feeling this way? Like, we shouldn't be feeling this way. But we are trying to normalize that this is how human experiences are like, and we need to understand that we are such complex beings. We experience things differently in a different way. Yes, one person can look at, for example, graduation as something that is something to be celebrated, and others would look at the things that they are missing out as well. So, different perspective. It doesn't mean that one perspective is right, and you usually we have the habit of like calling the other person negative because you are looking at the losses rather than the gain. So this is why it's important that we're talking about this today, so that we can offer each other this understanding and about what comes with grief. So yeah, as you mentioned earlier, to touch on the stages, right? Denial. It's definitely this sense of disbelief, and this is often when the truth start hitting us, the truth about the reality, but we are still in that sense of disbelief. So that's where a bit of loss in touch with the reality could happen as well, because you are not, you're numb, you're not very much present, and this indicates we are yet to accept the fact, the reality of the loss. Yeah, so that's where we are also not able to envision other outcomes or other future, because we are very much in disbelief, in denial of the situation. So this makes it very difficult to accept the loss that we are experiencing. So it's only understandable that we feel this, especially at the beginning stages, and
Yeah,
this can carry on. Yeah, you
yeah.
were saying?
I want to chip in to what you said, right? The denial
Mm-hmm.
part, right? And some people they got stuck in the denial part that they just like ignore that feeling totally. That then there's this type of grief whereby they just don't grieve about it. They just like make themselves numb and then go through with it until one day maybe some other things trigger them. Then only they might have this feeling that pops out again for the
Yeah.
unresolved grief. Mm.
So not acknowledging it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if they
So
don't go through the other stages and they got stuck there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Which is why awareness is important, right? Being
Mm.
aware is where you get to know what's happening in this situation. Am I in denial? Am I feeling anger? Am I bargaining?
Yeah.
Right? So, which is why the awareness is important. So,
Mm.
aside from denial, there's bargaining, and this usually happens in situations when we anticipate that we're about to lose something. For example, people with terminal illness, getting to know about either their own terminal illness or other people's terminal illness, for example, like cancer and whatnot, you know that this is it. You know, this is gonna be it for you or others, depending on the situation, right? So that's where we make deals, perhaps with ourselves and perhaps with God. If you're someone who believes in God, then we tend to have like a deal, a situation where we try to make deal with ourselves or with God in maybe
I have
try.
heard of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it kind of
Sometimes
like,
it
or maybe if I
works.
do more good, maybe my fate will change, those kind of things.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said it helps.
Sometimes I've heard of stories that the bargaining with God happens when, I mean, like if the person have illness, but there's a chance to recover lah. Then this kind of bargaining can happen, and sometimes
Indeed.
it works.
Yeah, yeah. And who's to say, right? Who's to
Yeah.
say? It's really, you know, it's really hard to tell. But yes, definitely, which is why it is very understandable that we also go through this process of bargaining. We either do it with ourselves or with the power above us, if we believe in that. Yeah, we tend to think like maybe doing this would help, maybe doing that would change my situation. So we think about ways to change our situation, and sometimes this can involve a lot of rumination about like how we can go back to past and do things differently, and this can cause a lot of distress as well, because rumination about something that in the past and something that which, by the way, you can't go and undo anything or change anything about it. So
Yeah.
this can keep us feeling in a mode of like where we feel really stuck. So that can happen, can come with a lot of what if questions. What if I had done this? So that's where a lot of regret can come in, a lot of guilt can come in. So notice how complex it is, right, to experience this. Yeah.
Yeah. About the one that you mentioned about the illness, right? Also, there's this type of grief. It's called anticipatory grief. Means
Yep.
that you are kind of anticipating the loss from a person or from something lah. And then you know that this might be a loss, so illness, terminal illness, and things like that, right? So one of the ways to kind of while you are in this process of grieving is also, you can consider, if it's your loved one or someone that really close to you, do something that you can look at what you can do in the present. If they are still conscious, talk to them, spend more time.
Indeed.
Saying I love you, this kind of things to say or to do with them before the end lah. It's like helping yourself to not have more regrets, and also to know that you are focusing on the present, what you can do at the moment. So I find that is one of the very useful ways lah to deal with it.
Definitely, definitely, and specifically in those anticipatory grief, you
Yeah.
know that it's about to happen. At first, it can be difficult for us to believe. We try to change the outcome, but as soon as it starts sinking in that this is what's going to be the reality, that's where we can look at what we can do right now. We can't go back to the past. We can't try to change the future. So in the present, what we can do. Yeah, that's gonna come with acceptance. So now acceptance is one of the stages in grief, and this is something that, as I mentioned earlier, isn't something that it's the final stage and it stops there. You can go through these stages again in many cycles. And acceptance, it's also very understandable sometimes that we experience acceptance first. Take for example the anticipatory grief, right? You hear about a loved one that who's going to eventually pass from their terminal illness. So the acceptance could easily come in first before you go through all the other stages. So that can happen as well in reverse. You know, you experience acceptance first. You know that okay, this is it. So you know you go into the acceptance stage. You come to terms with the reality, and after that you could be experiencing denial, anger, and whatnot after that as well. That could happen. So just because it looks different for one person, it doesn't mean that it's not the right way or it's unusual. It's very subjective, and it can really look different for everyone. So yeah, basically, it happens gradually where the pain could ease in the acceptance stage, and this is what we usually term as getting over it. Getting over some loss. But the truth about grief is that we don't truly get over it. because the absence is very much felt, and we would be reminded of that absence from time to time. So we
Yeah,
don't truly get over it
this is
actually.
something that I find very I don't know if everyone feels the same way, but when I just learned about this about grief, that you don't really get over it, you're just like kind of being more able to live with it, but the grief will still be there, kind of thing, right?
Indeed.
It's something a very, I don't know if everyone really knows about this concept, but I find it very surprising lah when I learned about it, because we typically tell ourselves like, get over it and stuff, right? I like how you say about it, but actually grief is like even many years later, this person who passed away or this thing that you lost, it will still be very ingrained in our memory, and we will feel quite like it's still there, but maybe
Mm-hmm.
after years, like time pass, you will be not feeling much about it,
Yeah.
but still it's like a significant event that you never get like past it,
Yeah.
you know, never
Yeah.
forget. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
So that goes with saying we can't expect ourselves to get over something, get over a loss, especially, right? Because yeah, it means that it means so much to us that, we naturally the intensity of our emotions tells how much those things or the people mean to us. So why should that mean we should get over them? Whatever getting over means, right? Getting over means no longer feeling the pain. But yes, while it's obviously preferable to not feel any pain and to not feel those kind of unpleasantness, but that in life there are ups and downs, and it's okay that we feel unpleasantness. It's okay that we feel the pain from time to time. It's about the kind of meaning we are making out of these experiences, actually. So a lot of reflection can really help us in trying to understand our emotions, in trying to understand what kind of meaning we are making out of these experiences. So the key isn't to push away anything that's unpleasant and just seek for pleasant stuff, just being happy all the time. That's not the goal, really. It's about to, as we are experiencing these unpleasantness, how do we still get through with our life, right? Because yeah, there are really complex emotions like anger, as you said, and anger could be not just about how we feel like it's unfair for the person to perhaps if it's death, then for the person to die young perhaps, or how we feel like we are undeserving of the pain or the other person is undeserving of the pain. The anger could be very much directed towards the person, towards the loss itself, or could be towards us for doing something or not doing something. So it's just so complex, really, really complex. Yeah.
Yeah.
And with that, it also comes with depression as well, the longingness, the yearning for the person that we have lost. And again, not just about the person, but the thing that we have lost as well, longingness for it. So we can be easily preoccupied thoughts about the things that we have lost, and it comes in waves as well. Sometimes it's more intense, sometimes it's less intense, but yeah, it's about how we are gonna surf through these waves. Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Which stage are we in now? Just to
I pretty
recap.
much covered all the stages. Yeah, pretty much covered all the
Oh.
stages of denial, bargaining, anger, depression, and acceptance. So I've covered
Mm.
all of it. Yes.
Wow, I can see how I mean like when I listen through it, I don't really notice the stages until you point out. Can see how you make them into a storyline. Yes.
Yes, because that's how in reality would look like. It's
Mm.
not very distinctive. It's like, okay, um, right, the moment we experience a loss, we will be in denial for a certain period of time, and then we will transition into bargaining, and then we might transition into anger. No, it doesn't happen like that. It happens in this kind of like really enmeshed way, in a messy
Mm.
way, even actually. Yeah.
Yes, yes. I have seen like clients who, like you said, starting with acceptance, and then but then later on when they really process and get in touch with their feelings, and then they will notice how are the other feelings, like still have some of the anger, depression feeling, like they go back to the other stages lah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
definitely. Yeah, and
Mm.
the most common thing that we always do is about like And especially I notice with those who go into acceptance quickly is that telling themselves there's no point worrying about it, there's no point crying, or there's no point thinking about it because you can't change the situation. While it is true that you can't change the situation, and while it is also true that there's no other way but to accept, it doesn't mean that you're not allowed to feel those emotions, because we can easily, in the attempt of trying to accept, we can easily push away our emotions and suppress it, bottle them up. That's what we're trying not to do, because yeah, everything that bottles up erupts at some point.
Yeah, I like the way you said it is, despite you feel like there's no way other than accepting, like you will eventually have to accept. It doesn't mean you cannot feel all these feelings of anger, denial, or depressed feelings from the loss itself. Yeah. And just now you mentioned about depressed, right? In one of the stages, right? So one more thing to let everyone know is that if you are experiencing grief for a long time, more than 12 months, or a very, very long time, like more than what usually at the generally what people would expect like in your culture. So you might feel still very intense emotionally, you are longing for the lost one, or you are in denial, finding it very hard to get through your day, feeling a lot of anger, unable to do your task, focus on your task because your mind is still very much yearning for the lost one. So if you are stuck in the phase of the grief that you couldn't really move, then emotionally as well, it can be classified as a prolonged grief disorder lah. Okay, so it's under the DSM-5, the version. It means that if it affects your daily routine lah. Yeah, so it's something to keep in your mind as well. Or if you find people close to you, they are still very much in the grief, or after 1-2 years, they are very still in the stage of grieving, and it affects their life, then you might want to seek out for professional help as well. Yeah, so that's about the prolonged grief when it got stuck there. But usually everyone goes through the stages when with the appropriate support, with friends, with the procedures where you go through, you really go and process your feelings, then usually you'll be able to get past that lah. And it is different if, let's say, you talk about prolonged grief disorder, it's different from depression as well, like major depressive disorder, because it's more focused on the grief and the person that they lost. So major depression disorder is different, whereby they focus on themselves or their inadequacy, low self-esteem, like mainly focus on themselves. But the grief part is more like focusing on the loss. Yeah, so that's the difference lah. So
I see.
yes,
Right.
yes.
Thank you for pointing out how these can, because like it can seem like they're pretty similar, but there's a distinction there. Just out of curiosity, is it possible for these a major depressive disorder and prolonged grief disorder to be in comorbidities?
Yes, there's a possibility.
That's a possibility as well.
Yeah, they can comorbid. But usually, usually they will try to like find out lah what your focus is on. Then if they comorbid, yeah, there's a possibility as well lah.
Right. So from there, what differentiates a normal grief process and a prolonged grief disorder is the state of functioning of the person, how well you're able to function, the kind of impact it has on your emotions and well-being. Right.
And we also look at the time frame as well. So to go into the disorder part is when it lasts for at least 1 year, and in adults lah, and also for the past 1 month when they come to the seeing the psychologist or something, past 1 month time is like almost every day they are impaired lah, their functioning is impaired, they cannot go through their life, they cannot work, they cannot focus, they cannot do the necessary things to take care of themselves. Yeah, so that could become like an impact lah.
Right. Yeah. Because it's important that we have this distinction clearly in our minds as well, right? Because we were also talking about how we never truly get over grief. So that can really make it confusing when we think about how there's like a time frame for it to consider as a grief. So the key deciding factor here would be how much the grief affects your current functioning. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that, for normal grief, you won't be experiencing it after like 1 or 2 years. You won't be experiencing the pain at all. It's that, even when you're experiencing these difficult emotions, you're still able to function, which is why it's not considered a disorder. Yeah.
Yes,
So,
yes.
yeah.
You are still able to
Mm-hmm.
go through your daily life, go and makan, go
Mm,
and take your bath, go and travel, all these
yeah,
things. Yeah, that's good lah.
right.
It's actually encouraged as well to do more of that after loss as well, to still maintain your routine lah.
Indeed,
Yeah,
indeed. Yeah.
yeah.
So
So we can proceed with the
definitely,
next one.
definitely. Yeah. So having all these things discussed, it can definitely bring the question of like, well, since it's something that it's inevitable that, in life we will experience loss along the way, and this is how the stages would look like, this is how the cycle will look like. It looks like very complex, very heavy. So naturally the next question would be, how do you cope with it, right? And again, when coping, a lot of people can fall into the trap of thinking that, how do I get over it? We would like to emphasize again how this isn't about getting over it. It's about how you're gonna perhaps still function even when you're still experiencing all these difficult emotions. You can't expect yourself to not feel them at all, that this will come and go at times. And when they do come and go, how you're going to cope with it. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
maybe we can invite our audience if there's anyone to want to share as well. How do you usually cope before we share more, so that we see if what's your usual coping skills as well, and whether it's helpful so far. All
definitely.
right. So anyone who wants to share, feel free to put in your comment. What do you usually use to cope with grief? And feel free to share how helpful it is to you as well. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah. And this can definitely, give insights into those who are perhaps currently experiencing it and not sure how to go about it. So, yeah, different experiences can definitely be helpful. Different ways of coping, actually, as long as it's more on the non-self-deprecating side, self-harming side. Yeah, anything at all that helps to cope, that should be a good way for us to look into it. So there's just a lot of ways to go about this. A lot of, when we talk about coping, it comes in different forms, right? It can be in anything that can be self-soothing for us, or anything that can distract us from something that is extremely distressful. So it can be in different forms of, like, practicing mindfulness, practicing being more in the present, to help us remind of what's in our control right now, and to help us process our emotions at the same time. So it can take different forms, so it can look different for everyone.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely, your feedback would be very valuable to whoever's watching as well. So yeah, anything you would like to share from your experience that you have find it to be helpful?
For me, I think the first thing is to recognize the feeling of grief, because for me, I haven't experienced a very major loss of like loved ones yet, luckily. But other than that, there's some other losses that I experience in life. There's many, and sometimes I don't really notice it until I watch a movie or I listen to a music. Then I realize, hey, I have a feeling of like a deep sadness, and then I don't notice like what's the reason behind this sadness. And then I go back and I really reflect on it. Then only I notice, hey, I actually experienced some kind of grief in this instance, or maybe graduation, maybe I still remember there was once when I was like 12 years old, graduated from primary school, you want to move on to your secondary school, right? I cried on the graduation day. Yeah. And then my mom said, "Why are you crying, ah?" Yeah. So then I realized, hey, that's a type of loss which when I was young I don't know, but when I grow up and I really reflect, hey, that they are the grief that I experienced without noticing. So the first thing is
Yeah.
to really notice in the moment as well, or maybe in your past if there's any unresolved unprocessed grief that
Yeah.
still there. That we can really take note of that and do something, or really give myself the space to cry about it, to
Of
listen to a
course.
song and cry badly about it. Yeah, something like that lah.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a question over here. I think you're
Yeah.
looking at it as well. Yeah.
Understand and aware of stages of grief. Is it okay for a person experiencing grief to stop it from proceed to the next stage? Instead, just accept it.
Mm.
Okay, thank you
So
for your
yeah.
question.
Yep, indeed.
Maybe you
Thank
want
you for
to,
the question.
yeah.
Sure, yes. As I mentioned earlier, it's we try not to look at these stages as something like distinctive in the sense that okay, after this we move on to next, because like it's very unmatched, right? But at the same time, it is also possible that you not experience one of the stages. Again, like I said, it's very subjective. So it's possible for one to not experience denial, and acceptance comes in quickly first, and you don't experience much of like bargaining and all these other emotions. It's possible as well. So it's about whether naturally the acceptance comes in, or whether we try to tell ourselves to accept and try to suppress these other things because it's so unpleasant. So that's the key thing here, actually. Whether we are actively trying to stop ourselves from experiencing these other stages because it's so unpleasant and it doesn't make sense to us to go through it. And again, like we try to justify it by saying that there's no point. The only way is to accept it. So we tell ourselves to accept it. That's where inevitably what you're doing is suppressing these other stages, which is not going to be fair to you as well. And like I said, whatever you suppress, it's going to show up, if not more intensely in much later time. So it's good to reflect on your own process because it looks different for everyone. So try to understand what stages you're at, what exactly you're experiencing, try to make sense of it. Like I said, it's very much possible for one to go into the acceptance stage easily, depending on the insights they have already about life, about knowledge. You have wisdom and insights that you feel like acceptance comes flows naturally for you. So that's also possible. So with that, I hope it answers your question. So, but just to keep in mind how this doesn't happen in like distinctive stages, and the key difference is whether we are naturally at this current stage or we are actively stopping ourselves from experiencing these other stages because it's very messy. Keep that in mind of not stop experiencing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the reasons that people don't want to skip to the acceptance is because it's much more pleasant, like you said, and the other stages are quite painful to go through, and you have a lot of feelings, emotions, sometimes very difficult to manage on your own as well.
Indeed.
So feel free to talk to someone that you're really close with, you trust, and also talk to a therapist if that helps. If you don't have that people around that really can openly listen to you and hold that space for you, because it's really hard to deal with it on your own. And a lot of times,
Indeed.
like if let's say about a more like a family member loss kind of death,
Yeah.
sometimes the family also don't want to talk about it. So it's really difficult to find like people who can understand your pain and also hold that space for you lah. So yeah, that's one more thing to add on for you lah,
Definitely.
right? So,
Definitely. This is also a way of coping, actually, having finding ourselves the space. Yes, if that space is available through someone or even through family members, friends, that would be excellent. And if you don't have that kind of space or you don't feel comfortable in doing that, definitely therapy is a place where you get to process this in a healthy way, in the sense that you would also start understanding about your own process. The key thing for coping here with grief is that having that safe space for us to, for all, having someone to hold that space for us to tell that it's okay that we're feeling it, because there's just when you think about it, right, there's nothing you can tell that will to kind of comfort the other person. There's nothing you can tell, like the other person is in a better place right now. it still doesn't feel right for someone who's grieving. There's nothing you can tell to comfort them, because the only thing that is needed in that moment is that space for them, holding that space for them to experiencing it and processing it actually. So having that space, be it therapy or be it through people you trust, family members, and especially with family members, I like how you pointed out, the common thing is that we don't talk about those things. But it's especially helpful when it's a shared experience, because when it's a family member, everyone shared that emotion. Actually, that sense of loss is felt, and that's where you can seek support and seek comfort with people who share similar experiences actually. So this could be easily one of the ways of coping.
Yes.
Yeah.
If that is that they are able to do that when they are really understand, right? I think if the family members can come together and process or talk about the lost one, actually it can be quite a very good space
Profound.
for them to process that feeling.
Definitely.
Mm.
Yeah.
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 Mm.
And of the things that can be discussed is about memories of this person that you lost, right? Memories of the things that you lost, what you miss. And it doesn't have to be sad things. It can be pleasant things that you guys had, and perhaps that can lighten up the mood as well. Maybe reminder of like a past pleasant experience, like a joke, or maybe like an inside joke that you guys share with the person. So those kind of things. So when we think about conversation, we will feel like conversation about the person that we flawed. We think it's very unpleasant because it's going to be all the sad stuff, and it doesn't have to be just that. It can be the pleasant ones as well, and the things that you can laugh about still. So sharing this, yeah, the most pleasant memory about the person, the favorite memory of the person, these kind of things can really allow us to process it even more, actually. Process these emotions
Yeah.
even more.
To add up to that, right, is actually a way to kind of reconnect with the past, with the
Indeed.
person who had lost, who's had passed
Mm-hmm.
lah. So like one of it, like you say, is to talk about the good parts or the happy times that really helps you to connect back. Or sometimes it's the activities. I saw someone talking about watching movies. Okay. So but like for example, if you used to like to watch movie with this person, or you used to like to listen to certain songs, or you used to do some activities with this person a lot, and now this person had passed. So what can you can do these things again to kind of be like a ritual to connect yourself back to that feeling,
Mm.
and feel like actually this person is not lost. It's like a different way of being with you lah. So it's a when you reach that acceptance stage, you can do more of this. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
definitely a different way of connecting with them still, finding ways to still feel connected with them. Because
Mm, mm, mm.
spiritually, or it doesn't have to be spiritual also, but like whatever that we believe in, if there's a way that we believe that keeps us connected with lost ones, and especially lost to death, right? Yeah, whatever it is that would help you feel connected, to still hold that connection with that person. You know how they say, like, person may not be physically there, but we can still feel their presence through the memories or through the things that you guys used to do. So yeah, the question about is it a healthy way to cope by watching something sad and crying alone? Yeah, as long as it provides you that outlet to process or have that emotional release, if that's what you need, definitely it's a healthy way. Yeah. Crying is
Yeah.
healthy, actually. It's therapeutic.
Yes. Yeah. So
Yeah.
crying. I think for me, right, I like to listen to some music and then it will make me cry for some reason. So music
Yeah.
as well. And some people write, draw, all this way, more artistic way also to
Yes.
it tunes into your feelings, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was
Mm.
gonna touch on this, how we can actually tap into our creative sides if we are creative people. It's okay if you're not, but if you're on the creative side, if you're someone who draws, or poetry could be excellent way of, processing these emotions. If you're into poetry, into writing, these things can definitely be great ways for us to um, yeah, just express and process our own emotions. And with that, also find some connection, because you can be very creative about how you express it, right? It can be the way you express it could be about a letter for this person or a poem for this person, or it could be about your experience of the loss. So you can get really creative with how you express it. Yeah, these are actually healthy ways to cope with grief, I would say.
Just one more person commenting, and sometimes I see bits of my late father in some random strangers I saw. That suits me. Oh, this is another way more connected to your late father. Sounds like that. And yeah, sometimes you see someone who gives you that vibe. It reminds you of the person that you love, your father, your parents, whatever. This is it's really a good feeling as well that you
Indeed.
can appreciate lah. Yeah.
Yeah, I find it interesting how we can seek comfort in very different ways, right? It looks, and this is something that I'm hearing, and it's very sweet. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, to seek comfort and feeling that sense of soothing when you see random strangers who can remind you of or resemble a loved one. That can definitely yeah, help us. And like I said, it's very different about how I mean, the way we find comfort can be very different. I once had someone sharing with me about how they feel connected with their loved one who they have lost is by simply talking in an empty room. And they're more expressive verbally, so she would just find a random spot, and like there's a favorite spot in her room, so she would just have a conversation just like that. And as it can sound like something that is very not just uncomfortable but also odd to do, but it helps her. It does help her to feel the connection with this loved one that she had lost. So that was very cathartic for her. So that's something that helped her, right? So just to share here, and if someone could resonate with it, because yeah, it doesn't have to look like a textbook way of dealing with it. It can be very, very different. It can be very unique as well. Yeah.
Mm. That's a
Yeah.
very interesting one. Like, it sounds like the case that you mentioned is like a like movie. Like they portray how they talk to the empty space, but actually it plays out
Yeah.
in real life. And I can imagine how it is soothing to that person because you still want that connection. As long as you can establish that connection, it's actually very helpful.
Yeah.
There's one more person, Morgan, commenting on mindfulness. I think you are suggesting that mindfulness is a helpful technique as well.
Definitely.
Mm, yes. Mindfulness helps you to ground yourself back to the present, so you're not so much attached to the past or the future. So that's the part that is good as well lah. You're not ruminating, overthinking, and things like that. Being more grounded.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of ways in which we can be mindfulness. Prayer can be a form of mindfulness as well. If we are someone who's religious, this is something that can help. So whatever it is that feels, helpful and soothing. I mean, rituals is something that you talked about as well, right? Having a ritual to mourn the loss. Yeah, in that sense, in different culture, it can look very different. Different religion, it can, there are like different rituals, but these rituals are actually it's great to have them in place. Actually helps us with the processing part as well. So if the person, and this one we are talking more specifically about losing someone to death, right? So actually visiting the grave from time to time, talking to the grave as if you're talking to the person. These kind of things can be really helpful as well. Or like writing a letter, could be a goodbye letter, or could be just a letter about updating them about your life perhaps, or telling them what you're hoping. It can be in form of questions as well. It can be really, it's all about conversations with this person, and it can be in the most natural and organic way that you've always had with the person. It doesn't have to make sense to anyone. As long as it makes sense to you, and as long as it helps you feel connected with that person.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like you said, rituals as for the not for loss of a person, but sometimes it's changes in your life or transitions. So in this kind of grief, it is more like there's no specific rituals assigned by the
Yeah.
culture, like you know you have a day for this or that. But in this smaller or like not recognized kind of grief lah,
Yeah.
right? Unrecognized. So in this kind of case, you can feel free to do something as a ritual or a conclusion for yourself as well. So for example, if you're moving into parenthood, you just have a newborn baby. So maybe do something for yourself as well to kind of recognize that hey, I'm transitioning to a new stage. Or if it's a change of job, feel free to do that as well for yourself to feel like okay, I'm ready to move on or things like that, like to process that feeling lah, the grief
Mm.
feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. And this reminded me of like I'm into letter writing, right? So writing a letter to your past self can help through these transitions as well. Like, what kind of emotions you're feeling right now, whether you're feeling scared, what you're going through right now, and you can write that letter to your past self and maybe writing your hopes, what you're hoping to change in this transition. And yeah, this is what could really help us have like this allow us to really process it and make sense of our own emotions as well. Yeah, this could
Yes,
be
I
a
like
really good way to
letter
reflect.
writing.
Mm-mm.
And once you wrote it, maybe 1 year later you look back, it is so much of a you feel a lot of it's good memories, also a lot of like achievement, like oh look how far you have gone from this until today, like a lot of changes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
the plus
looking
point.
back, yeah, it will be like a very sweet moment actually to look back and see how you would have felt at a point and few years down the road or few months down the road, when you look back, it feels like wow, we've come a long way. It reminds you of the journey, basically. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yeah. So
So
that's
we've got a few
about it.
more minutes left.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe
Mm-hmm.
anyone who have any more questions, feel free to jot down in the comment. And before we have 3 more minutes.
Yeah.
So today we have gone through from understanding what grief is, the different types of grief. Of course, there are a lot more that you can feel free to read up online. We have mainly discussed 3 types. So one is anticipatory, the one that you predict that the person or something will be lost. Prolonged grief, that is ongoing grief for too long. And then
Mm-hmm.
the last one is disenfranchised grief. Is a very mouthful. Yeah,
Yes.
disenfranchised means that some grief that you is not socially understood. Sometimes it's your own life process that people don't really understand sometimes, and you also don't understand. But it
Mm-hmm.
exists lah. That kind of grief or changes you have to go through in life. And
Yeah.
Naomi has talked about the 5 stages where you can jump around these stages. It's not a linear process. It's a rapid. It's like a cycle lah, and it can go with different stages. And grief never really is something that you get over. It's more like something you live with it, and you are okay to have it in your past. Once you get less affected emotionally lah, your emotions are fully processed, then you feel more at peace with having this thing in your life. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk
Yeah. Yeah.
about
Indeed.
many ways as well, right? Yeah.
Yes, and there's a lot of ways to cope with it. So find one that works the best for you, and reaching out to people with similar experiences could help you with that process as well. And yes, with that, we're definitely trying to end on a note to remind everyone how complicated and how complex grief is. One day you can feel like, yeah, you're doing okay. You're not being reminded of the instances as much, you're just getting about your day as usual, and some days their absence are felt even more intensely. And sometimes it can come with guilt as well about how you feel like you've moved on, and or how you, in certain instances, you may have forgotten. So it can be very complex. It's really really complex. So just it's all about trying to make sense of your own emotions when it comes to experiencing this grief. And yeah, just how with the nature of the process, where smallest reminder of the things that we've lost can really bring up a lot of emotions, and we can feel like we're experiencing it for the first time all over again. While we can get into the habit of like beating ourselves up and see it as a sign of regress, that doesn't have to be the case. Actually, this is just how naturally the process of grief is like. We can feel the emotions all over again. But yeah, be mindful of how it affects your functioning. And if it does affect your functioning, do seek for the right type of help. And keeping in mind that this is how naturally the grief process looks like. We never truly get over it. It's more of like something with the right tools, with the right skills, coping skills. We learn to grow around it. The kind of like the size of that pain pretty much stays actually. We just grow bigger around it with either with new connections or how we make sense of this experience. We just grow over time. Yeah.
All right. Thank
Mhm.
you, everyone. Is everyone still here? If you are still here, you can put your thumbs up or you can put
Yeah,
your love so that have a good day ahead, and
for sure.
also celebrating the Merdeka Day tomorrow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, happy Independence Day to us.
Yeah. All right.
All right. So with that,
Okay.
thank you everyone for being here today, and I hope you got really helpful insights on this. Feel free to always send us your feedback, comments, whatever it is that you have to share. And of course, thank you for your comments as well.
Thank you. Bye
All right.
bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.